This is the story of something that happened to me last year. I'm going to tell you exactly how it happened, and I swear, I'm not making any of it up. I know people say that all the time, but this is different. It still gives me chills when I think about it. And I haven't gone jogging at night ever since. So here's what happened. I live in a quiet town, one of those places where everyone knows everyone and nothing big ever really happens. I've always liked jogging, especially in the evenings. After work, I'd throw on my headphones, lace up my shoes, and hit the trail near my apartment. It's peaceful, you know. Trees on both sides, a small river to the right, and those old-fashioned street lamps lighting the path. Most people don't use the trail after dark, but I never cared. I liked the silence. This one evening, early October, cool breeze, clear. Sky. I decided to go for a longer jog. I left around 8:30 p.m., just after dinner. I remember the moon was full that night. It lit up the path even without the lamps. I was about 15 minutes in, right where the trail bends and disappears into a thicker patch of woods, when I saw something weird. At first, I thought it was just another jogger. There was someone ahead of me, maybe 100 feet or so, walking slowly. They were wearing all black, like a hoodie with the hood up and dark pants. I couldn't see their face. Nothing unusual, I told myself. People wear hoodies. Maybe they just wanted some fresh air, too. But then I noticed they weren't moving right. The person's steps were off, like they were dragging one foot a little, left foot, right foot, then a slow scrape. Left, right, scrape. It made a sound too, kind of like a shoe being dragged across rough concrete. And even stranger, they didn't react when I got closer. Usually people will at least glance over their shoulder, right? You hear someone coming up behind you, you turn, you move aside, you nod. Something, but this person didn't move at all, didn't look, just kept walking, left, right, scrape. I slowed down, pulled out one of my earbuds, and said, "Hey, excuse me?" I didn't want to scare them, but I needed to pass. No answer, no reaction. So I jogged a little to the side, planning to go around them. But as I moved past, I looked at their face, and I swear to you, it wasn't right. Their skin looked wrong, pale, like gray paper. Their eyes were wide open, but the whites were all dull and yellowish like something rotting. And their mouth. It was hanging open just slightly, but I could see that the tongue inside was dark, like almost black. I got this overwhelming feeling, like my body suddenly knew something my brain hadn't caught up to yet. This person wasn't alive. I stumbled forward, heart racing, almost tripping over my own feet. I didn't look back. I just ran. I ran faster than I ever had. My lungs were burning, my legs hurt, but I just kept going. Finally, I reached a break in the trees where the trail opens up near the street. There's a bench there, and I stopped, trying to catch my breath. I looked behind me. No one. The trail was empty. Now listen, maybe I imagined it. That's what I kept telling myself. Maybe it was just a sick person. Maybe they were wearing makeup or something. I had only glanced at their face. Maybe I panicked. But that's not where the story ends. The next night, I told my friend Jake about it. He lives nearby and also jogs sometimes. I joked with him about the zombie walker I saw on the trail. He laughed, but told me to be careful. 2 days later, Jake called me. His voice was shaking. "Dude," he said, "I saw it. I knew right away what he meant. He said he went jogging late, around 9. Just like me, he saw someone on the trail. Same dragging walk, same hoodie, same pale face. He said the thing stopped when he got close and turned toward him. He didn't even look long. He just turned and ran all the way back to his car. Said he felt like he was being followed, even when he got back home. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what we both saw. I even thought about going back, maybe to get proof or just see if it was real. But something in me said no. Like a heavy warning in my gut, and then things got worse. A week later, I saw on the local news that a young woman had gone missing, disappeared while jogging, last seen on that same trail. I felt sick. They showed a picture of her. She looked like she could have been my neighbor. I didn't know her, but I felt like I did. The trail was closed off for 2 days. Cops and search teams everywhere, but they found nothing. 3 nights later, Jake called me again. This time, he sounded terrified. He said he hadn't gone back to the trail, but he'd been hearing things outside his apartment at night, like footsteps, dragging footsteps. He lived on the 2nd floor, and one night he swore he heard someone walk up the stairs and just stop outside his door. He didn't open it. He just sat there in the dark holding a baseball bat. After that, I didn't hear from him for a few days. When I finally did, he told me he moved out of town, just like that. No goodbye. Just packed his stuff and left. And here's the part that messes me up the most. About a month after all that, I got curious again. Stupid, I know. But I went back to the trail during the day. It looked normal. Birds chirping, sun shining, even a few people walking. But then I saw the bench where I had stopped that night, and carved into the wood, rough, deep scratches, was something that hadn't been there before. It said, "Still walking, still watching." Backed away, heart pounding, and left without looking back. So yeah, that's the story I had to tell you. I don't jog at night anymore. Sometimes I still hear footsteps outside my window. But when I check, nothing. Maybe it's just in my head. But if you ever find yourself on a trail at night and you hear slow steps behind you, left, right, scrape, don't look back. This is the story of something that happened to my cousin Ryan 2 years ago. I'm going to tell you the whole thing exactly how he told it to me. And trust me, it still gives me chills every time I think about it. Ryan isn't the type to make up stories. He's tough, straight-faced, and always the calm one in scary situations. But this night messed him up badly. It happened in early spring when the air is still cold at night, but the days start warming up. Ryan had just moved into a new apartment in a quiet little town on the edge of some woods. It was the kind of place where people wave at each other but mostly keep to themselves. His apartment complex backed right up to a long jogging path that disappeared into the trees. Now Ryan's a fitness freak. He jogs almost every day, even when he's tired, even when it's raining. That path behind his apartment, he thought it was perfect. So this one night, after unpacking boxes all day, he decided to go for a run. It was around 9:15 p.m., a little later than usual. but he figured he'd just do a quick lap and come back. He threw on a hoodie, grabbed his phone and earbuds, and headed out. The trail was dimly lit, just a few lamps scattered here and there. Most of it was just moonlight. The trees made long shadows across the ground. He said the first 10 minutes were fine, peaceful even. Cool air, stars above, the crunch of gravel under his shoes. But then he started feeling weird, not scared exactly. Just watched. At first, he brushed it off, figured it was just his imagination or maybe a deer nearby, but that feeling didn't go away. It got stronger, like something just behind him, keeping pace. So he stopped, turned around. Nothing, just the empty trail and trees swaying gently. Still, the feeling didn't leave. He picked up the pace a little, now more alert. The trees seemed darker somehow. The wind a little colder. That's when he saw it. At the edge of the trail, maybe 30 feet ahead, just between two trees, was a person, or at least it looked like a person. Tall, very tall, maybe over 7 feet. Thin, too thin, wearing something long and dark, like an old coat or robe. The head was tilted slightly, like it was curious. Ryan stopped in his tracks. He thought maybe it was just a tree, stump, or a trick of the light. So he took out his earbuds and squinted, and then it moved. It didn't walk like a person. It kind of glided. No footsteps, no bounce, just a smooth, unnatural motion toward the path. Ryan didn't wait. He turned around and ran. Full sprint, heart pounding in his chest. He didn't look back. He said the air suddenly felt thicker, like it was harder to breathe, like something heavy was right behind him. When he reached the entrance of the trail, right near his apartment complex, he stopped to catch his breath. His legs were shaking, but he forced himself to look back. Nothing. The path was empty. Quiet. Ryan stood there for a while, trying to convince himself he was just tired. Maybe overworked. Maybe imagining things. He walked the few steps back to his apartment, locked the door, and tried to laugh it off. But that night, around 2 a.m., something woke him up. A knock. 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. He sat up in bed, his mouth dry. The knocks came again, this time louder. Not on his door. On his bedroom window. He lived on the 2nd floor. Ryan said his heart just stopped. He didn't move, didn't breathe. He was too afraid to look. He reached slowly for his phone and called me. I was asleep, but something told me to pick up. I heard his whisper, shaky and panicked. "Something's at my window." I told him not to look. To stay low, don't make a sound. He said he could hear a slow, dragging sound now, like fingers scraping across the glass. Then it stopped. Total silence. After a few minutes, he crawled out of bed, staying low, and peeked just enough to glance outside. Nothing. But on the glass, there were 3 long, vertical smudge marks, like someone had dragged their fingers across it. Ryan didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next morning, he went down to the office and asked the manager if there were any security cameras pointing at the trail entrance. The manager looked confused and said no, but then she paused and said something that made his stomach drop. "You're not the first one to ask," she said. "A woman who lived here last year? She asked the same thing. Then she moved out suddenly. He asked if she'd left a reason. She said she saw something in the woods. After that, Ryan started jogging only during the day. He avoided the trail entirely, but it didn't end there. Every few nights, just past midnight, he'd hear those same knocks. Knock, knock, knock. Always 3. Always at the window. He bought blackout curtains, tried earplugs, slept with the lights on. Nothing helped. It always came back. One night, he finally had enough. He waited near the window with his phone camera ready, hoping to catch whatever it was. He stayed up, staring through a small gap in the curtains. Just after 2 a.m., it happened again. Knock, 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 and there it was. He said he saw a tall shape just standing there, completely still. No face, just darkness under a hood or shadow. Long arms, thin fingers. He snapped a photo and ducked down. After what felt like forever, the knock stopped. When he got the courage to look again, it was gone. He sent me the picture. It was blurry, dark, but I could make out a shape. A tall outline, long limbs, definitely not normal. The next day, Ryan gave his notice and moved out. Packed everything, and left within a week. He's living in a different state now. He still jogs, but only at gyms or in open parks during the day, and sometimes when we talk, he says he still dreams about it. He hears the knocks in his sleep. Always 3. So that's the story I had to tell you. If you ever move near a trail, in the woods, and if you ever hear a knock at your window in the middle of the night, don't look. Just don't look. This is the story of something that happened to my best friend Lisa, and I swear I'll never forget it. It started just like any other night, but what she went through after that still gives me chills when I think about it. I can't explain it, and to this day she can't either. But if you're someone who likes to wander around at night, maybe think twice after you hear this. Lisa was always a bit of an adventurer, not in the usual sense, but more like someone who liked to walk around, explore new places, and get lost in her own thoughts. She lived in a small town with some wooded areas and quiet streets, and every once in a while she'd get the urge to go on a late-night walk. I told her it wasn't a good idea, especially in the woods, but she was always so confident about it. Saying it helped clear her head. She'd grab her jacket, a flashlight, and go. Most of the time, I didn't even think much of it. That was until that one night. It was about 3 weeks ago. She had been telling me all day that she was going to take a walk through the woods behind her house. Nothing unusual there. She'd done it plenty of times before. But that night, it felt different. Like something was off. You know when you have that feeling, but you can't explain it? Yeah, that's how I felt. So of course I tried to convince her to stay in. You know, it's getting late, and you've been really tired lately, I told her over the phone. I'll be fine, she said, laughing. It's just a walk. Plus I like the quiet. It was nearly 11 p.m. when she left. I wasn't too happy about it, but she insisted that she'd be back in an hour. I didn't expect to hear from her again until she got home. But about 40 minutes later, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. I answered. Lisa? I asked, hoping it was her. There was a pause on the other end, and then I heard something. A low, almost quiet breathing sound, like someone was standing too close to the phone but not speaking. Hello? I asked again, more urgently this time. The breathing continued, but it wasn't Lisa's voice. It was deeper, and there was something off about it, almost like a growl. I felt my heart race. "Lisa, is that you?" I asked again, feeling a cold chill run down my spine. But then suddenly, I heard her voice. "Get out of the woods, now!" It wasn't a normal voice. It sounded almost panicked, like she was whispering, but at the same time, it had a sharp edge to it. The line went dead before I could even say anything. My mind was spinning, trying to figure out what had just happened. Why would she call me from an unknown number and say something like that? And why was she so scared? I tried calling her back immediately, but there was no answer. I waited a few minutes and then I called again. Nothing. It felt like hours before. I couldn't take it anymore, and I drove over to her house even though I was completely terrified. I didn't know what was going on, but I couldn't just sit there. When I got to her house, the lights were off, and her car was parked in the driveway. I rang the doorbell. No answer. I knocked. Still nothing. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I didn't know what to do. I decided to head to the woods. The path behind her house went deep into the trees, and there was a small creek that ran through it. But the farther you went in, the darker and more isolated it got. I grabbed a flashlight from my car, trying to ignore the fear bubbling up inside me. I followed the path she always took, but the deeper I went, the stranger it felt. The air was heavy. The wind barely moved through the trees, but the sound of distant branches creaking made the whole place feel like it was alive in some way. I couldn't explain it. And then, as I reached the creek, I saw it. There was a figure standing there, near the water's edge. A shadowed figure, tall, thin, wearing dark clothes that blended in with the night. I froze. I couldn't see its face, but I could tell it was not Lisa. I yelled out, hoping it was someone just out for a walk, too. "Hey, who's there?" The figure didn't move. It just stood still, staring ahead like it was waiting. I stepped forward cautiously, keeping my flashlight aimed at it, and then, just when I thought I was going to lose my nerve, it turned. The face. It had a face, but it wasn't a human face. It was pale, almost ghostly white, and stretched too. Wide. The eyes were completely black, no whites at all. The mouth was thin, stretched into a tight, unnatural smile. A smile that didn't belong on a person's face. It sent a wave of cold panic through me, like my body was telling me to run. But before I could move, I heard a voice. Lisa's voice. "Get away from it! Run!" I didn't hesitate. I turned and bolted, heart pounding in my ears. I didn't look back once. I ran all the way to her house, and by the time I got there, I was gasping for air, my body shaking. Lisa wasn't there. I ran inside and checked every room, but she was nowhere to be found. I dialed her number again. This time, it rang. "Lisa?" I asked, breathing hard. She picked up, and there was silence for a moment. Then her voice, quieter this time, shaky, said, "I'm at the old church down the road. Come to me. Now." I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but I didn't question it. I drove as fast as I could to the old church, a rundown building that hadn't been used in years. It was just a few miles from her house, but it felt like forever. When I got there, I found her standing outside, her face pale and wide-eyed, shaking. She said nothing at first, but when I ran up to her, she whispered, "It wasn't me on the phone, that thing in the woods. It followed me." Her voice broke, and she clung to me like she was afraid it might come back. We didn't stay there long. We left the church behind us. and she stayed with me that night. But she didn't sleep. She just stared at the walls, and I could see the fear in her eyes, the kind that stays with you long after the danger is gone. The next day, we tried to go back to the woods to get some answers, but we never found anything. No tracks, no signs, nothing that could explain what had happened. Lisa moved out of the house a week later. She couldn't stay there anymore. And now, every time I hear about someone taking a walk in those woods, I warn them. But nobody ever listens, do they? If you ever find yourself near those woods at night and you hear something or someone calling your name from the trees, don't go closer. Just walk away. Because sometimes things in the woods aren't who they say they are, and they never forget. This is the story of a night I'll never forget, a night that changed everything for me and my friends. I know it sounds like one of those stories you hear around campfires, but I swear it happened. You might laugh now, but trust me, if you were there, you wouldn't be laughing. It all started when me and my friends, Dave and Sarah, decided to take a trip to an old abandoned house on the outskirts of town. The house had been there for years, hidden deep in the woods. Everyone knew about it, but no one dared go near it. The rumors had always been there. Ghosts, strange sounds at night, and sometimes people just disappearing. But none of that bothered us. We were looking for something exciting, something to give us a thrill. That Friday night, we packed our bags with snacks, flashlights, and a couple of beers, and made our way to the house. It was only about 20 minutes from our place, but it felt like an eternity as we drove through the dense forest. The trees were thick, their branches hanging down like twisted fingers reaching for the road, and the night was unnervingly quiet. "Are you sure we're doing this?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling just a bit, even though she was trying to sound confident. "Of course we are," Dave replied with a grin, clearly excited. "What's the worst that can happen?" We laughed. But deep down, I felt something I couldn't quite explain. It wasn't fear, not exactly. More like a feeling that we were about to cross a line we shouldn't be crossing. When we arrived, the house stood there, dark and silent, like it had been waiting for us. The windows were boarded up, and the door, which hung slightly ajar, creaked as the wind blew through the cracks. We parked our car and stood there for a moment looking at the place. It felt alive somehow. "You guys ready?" Dave asked, his voice filled with that usual bravado. I wasn't so sure anymore, but I didn't want to back out, not in front of my friends. We grabbed our flashlights and made our way inside. The air smelled musty, old, like no one had been here in years. The wooden floors creaked under our weight, and the beams overhead groaned as if the house was shifting, sighing. "Weird," Sarah said, shining her flashlight along the walls. "It's like no one's even touched this place in forever." "Yeah, it's like it's frozen in time," I added, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. We continued exploring, moving through the dusty rooms. The silence was so thick that it pressed against my ears. It was like the house was holding its breath. In the back of the house, we found a staircase leading down to the basement. The stairs were old and creaky, and they smelled like mold. But for some reason, we all agreed to go down. The thrill was in the unknown, after all. The basement door was already open, hanging crookedly off its hinges. As we stepped down into the darkness, the air grew colder, heavier. Our flashlights flickered as we moved deeper, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "What do you think's down here?" Dave asked, trying to make light of it. But I could tell he wasn't feeling so confident anymore either. "I don't know," I replied, my voice a little shaky, "but I don't think we should be here." But it was too late to turn back. We were already in the basement, and all of a sudden, we heard it. A faint sound, like something scraping against the floor. It was distant at first, like it was coming from the other end of the room, but then it got louder. "Did you hear that?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. I nodded. My heart was pounding now. I felt like we were being watched. The sound was growing closer, and it was like something was dragging itself toward us. "Guys, I think we should leave," I said, my voice almost breaking. But just as I turned to head back up the stairs, the flashlight flickered and went out. Darkness surrounded us. It wasn't the kind of darkness you're used to either. It felt thick, like it was pressing in on us. "Sarah?" Dave called out, his voice unsteady. "I'm right here," she replied, her voice trembling. "I don't know what's going on. My flashlight just..." And then, in the pitch-black silence, we heard it. A slow, dragging sound. Something heavy moving on the floor behind us. "Who's there?" I yelled, panic rising in my throat. "What's going on?" I fumbled with the flashlight, trying to get it to turn back on, but no matter how hard I tried, it wouldn't budge. Suddenly, I heard Sarah scream. It wasn't a scream of surprise or even fear. It was a scream of pain. My blood ran cold. I rushed toward her, but I couldn't see anything. The darkness was swallowing everything. "Sarah!" I shouted, but the only answer I got was another scream, followed by the sound of something scraping against the floor. I reached out, blindly, grabbing at the air, and finally my hand brushed against her arm. "Sarah, are you okay?" I asked, pulling her toward me. She was shaking uncontrollably. I could feel her body trembling beneath my touch. I don't know," she whispered. "Something touched me. I felt it. Something cold." Before I could respond, the flashlight clicked on again. For a split second, I saw it. A figure standing at the far end of the basement. It was tall, unnaturally thin, with long, gangly limbs. Its face was obscured by shadows, but I could see its eyes. Black, soulless eyes staring right at us. "Go!" Dave shouted, and I didn't need any more encouragement. We bolted up the stairs, and I could hear the thing behind us, dragging itself, getting closer. When we reached the front door, it was locked. We panicked, trying to turn the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The figure was almost on us, its cold breath brushing against the back of my neck. "Please," I begged, pulling at the door. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the door swung open. We tumbled out into the night, gasping for air. We didn't stop running until we were far, away from the house. We didn't even look back. We never spoke about it after that night. It's like it never happened. But I know what I saw, and I'll never forget the sound of that thing dragging itself across the floor, getting closer and closer. If you ever hear about an abandoned house deep in the woods, where the air feels heavier, the darkness seems to swallow you whole, stay away. It's not a place you want to visit. It's not a place you can leave once you've crossed its threshold. Trust me. This is the story of something that happened to me and my friend Luke a couple of years ago. It was one of those nights where everything felt off, but we didn't realize how bad it would get until it was too late. If you've ever been somewhere that felt wrong, you'll know exactly what I mean. We had been talking about going camping for months, and after a lot of planning, we finally decided to head out. Luke and I were the adventurous type, always looking for the next thrill. The weather was perfect, the kind of crisp night that makes you want to breathe in deep and feel the air on your skin. We packed our gear, tents, sleeping bags, food, and all that, and headed for a remote spot we'd heard about from an old hiker who used to live near us. It was called Red Pine Ridge. According to the guy, it was a peaceful place, far from the usual crowds. He said the views were incredible, especially at sunset, but he also warned us that people sometimes heard strange noises there at night. It seemed harmless at the time, just an old man telling stories. We were too excited to care about a few spooky tales. When we got there, it was even more remote than we'd imagined. The trees were thick, their branches tangled together like they were holding secrets. It was quiet, so quiet that you could hear your own heartbeat. We set up camp by a small clearing near a stream, and Luke immediately cracked open a beer, smiling like we were kings of the world. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the ground. We joked around, roasted marshmallows, and talked about everything and nothing. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the dark sky stretched out above us, full of stars. There was a weird sense of calm, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was the way the trees loomed around us, or the strange quiet that hung in the air. "You good?" Luke asked, noticing me staring into the woods. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just thinking. You're not getting spooked by old man stories, are you?" He laughed, not even trying to hide the teasing in his voice. "Not at all," I replied, but I didn't feel all that sure. That night we lay in our tents, trying to get some sleep. The sound of the stream was soothing at first, but then around midnight, I started hearing something else. A soft rustling sound, like leaves moving, but it didn't sound like wind. I thought maybe it was an animal, but as the sound got closer, I realized it wasn't. It was too rhythmic, too deliberate. I lay there, listening, my heart starting to race. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that I was just being paranoid. But then I heard a voice. It was low, barely above a whisper, but clear enough for me to make out the words. "Get out!" My blood ran cold. My mind raced, trying to understand what I'd just heard. The voice was distant, like it was coming from the trees, but it wasn't anyone I knew. I scrambled out of my sleeping bag and unzipped the tent. Luke was still sleeping, snoring lightly. I stepped outside, trying to be as quiet as possible, but my feet felt heavy, like the ground was pulling me down. The air felt colder now, and the darkness seemed deeper somehow. I listened hard, my breath fogging in the chilly air. Nothing. The rustling had stopped and the voice was gone. I stood there for what felt like hours, but there was no sound, no movement. It felt like the whole forest was holding its breath. Finally, I went back to the tent, telling myself it was just my imagination. But when I got inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I pulled the zipper tight, trying to block out the sounds of the woods. The next morning, Luke was already up, starting the fire. He didn't seem bothered at all, joking around like he always did. "Sleep okay?" he asked, his voice light. "Yeah, fine," I lied. "You look a little pale, man. What's wrong?" "I'm good," I said quickly. "Just didn't sleep much, that's all." We spent the day hiking, but I kept feeling like someone was watching us. Every now and then, I'd catch a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye. But when I turned, there was nothing there. The more we walked, the more I noticed that the woods felt unnatural. The trees were too close together, their trunks gnarled and twisted like they were reaching out for us. The sunlight barely made it through the canopy, casting the forest floor in a permanent shadow. That night, the unease grew. The strange sound started again, rustling leaves, the snap of twigs, but no animals in sight. And then, as the moon rose high, the voice came back. This time it was louder, clearer. "Leave. Now." I froze, my heart pounding. I looked around the camp, half expecting to see someone standing just beyond the firelight. But there was no one, just the trees, stretching out into the darkness. I got up, my hands shaking. "Luke," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" he asked, looking up from his phone. "That voice." He raised an eyebrow. "What voice?" I shook my head. Never mind. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that the forest around us was closing in. I grabbed the flashlight and began scanning the trees. That's when I saw it, a shadow moving just outside the firelight. It was tall, too tall, with a figure that looked almost human but wrong. The shape shifted, like it was made of darkness itself, and then it disappeared into the trees. I blinked, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. But when I turned back to Luke, he was already up, grabbing his jacket. "Let's get out of here," I said, panic creeping into my voice. "Something's wrong with this place." He gave me a look, one that told me he thought I was losing it, but I saw the hesitation in his eyes. "You sure?" "Yes, I'm sure," I insisted. We packed up quickly, our hands fumbling as we grabbed our stuff. The feeling of being watched intensified with every passing second. The rustling continued, growing louder, like something was moving closer. Finally, we were ready to go. But just as we started to leave the clearing, I heard one final whisper, a voice that sent ice through my veins. "Stay. Forever." I didn't need to hear more. We ran, and we didn't stop running until we reached the car. To this day, I don't know what we encountered that night. I don't know if it was a ghost, a spirit, or something worse. But I know one thing. Some places are better left untouched. If you ever find yourself near Red Pine Ridge, remember this story. The forest has a way of pulling you in, and once it does, you might not leave the same way you came. So if you value your safety, stay away. Trust me, it's not worth the risk.